Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name's Steve, and it is time for the Week 7 wide receiver rankings. There will be a running back rankings video coming out this evening, and then quarterbacks and tight ends video coming out tomorrow morning. Let's get into the injuries, the interesting usage information. How did I do with my loves and my fades last week? Starting off with the injuries. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a concussion. Sometimes players can come back the next week. Most often they don't, and sometimes it could be longer than that. Dontavian Wicks has an ankle injury. Don't know how severe. Puka Nacua ankle injury. Sounds like he's going to be out for a week. So I'm not ranking any of those three, nor am I ranking Garrett Wilson right now with for some reason, Quad is coming to my mind, but he had an injury late in that game. Juwan Jennings made it through the game, but after the game we found out that he's apparently has several broken ribs and a high ankle injury and a low ankle, sprain, high ankle and low ankle sprains to, I guess, both of his ankles. I don't know, maybe they're both on the same ankle. I don't know how that works, but just something to keep in mind for Juwan Jennings. Emeka Egbuka had a hamstring injury, so would expect him to miss some time, not ranking him. Same with Calvin Ridley, hamstring, not ranking him. DJ Moore was brought to the hospital after the game. Precautionary, but we don't know anything really about that. Currently am ranking him, but we'll see as we gather more information. Josh Palmer had an injury. It's Josh Palmer. So, interesting usage information. We start off here with this is all taken from J.J. Zachariason's information dump that he puts out there onto the social medias every Monday morning, so you can always find this information there. But I go through it, sift through it, and present what I think is most important information, sometimes maybe provide a little bit of context to it as well. So Courtland Sutton has been below a 15% target share in half of his games so far this season. I do think some of that has to do with matchups, so definitely a guy who we have to be concerned about the matchups where there is a kind of a number one type of shutdown cornerback on the other side of the field. Will lower Courtland Sutton in those situations almost certainly, because then he just becomes touchdown reliant, it would appear. Troy Franklin had the lowest route share since week 1. Don't know what to do with that. Don't know why that is, but something we'll just keep an eye on. Josh Downs has target shares of 23% and 27% in his last 2 games. And if you are not aware, if you've forgotten, he did come into the season injured, and so he's kind of been ramping up, and this might be the new norm for Josh Downs. So we'll keep an eye on seeing how consistently that kind of thing happens, but that could make him usable. Keenan Allen has had below a 20% target share in 2 of his last 3 games after being above 23% the first 3 weeks. And his production has drastically dropped with the change in that target share. And even last week, no Quentin Johnston, and that was the case, below 20%. So, some concerns there. This also does correlate some with that offensive line getting banged up and that offense just not being as good, because even when he was receiving above a 23% target share those first 3 weeks, he was still a little bit touchdown reliant. We thought that was pretty safe because this offense was humming, and then that offensive line got even more banged up. Now, it might be getting healthier in sooner than later, even potentially, so that would be a help in general for at least maybe those touchdowns to start to return, if nothing else. Malik Washington is still running fewer routes than Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but, it's not like I'm ranking Nick Westbrook-Ikhine really anyways. Jalen Waddle had over a 20% target share every week in the last 2 weeks with no Tyreek Hill. Stephon Diggs' route rate dropped again this week. It has gone down, up, down, up, down, up so far this season. And, he's coming off of himself, older man injury, severe injury. That could be part of the reason for that. Who knows? But if that continues and if that doesn't stabilize at any point at a higher rate, of course, he might be someone who is just, we have to keep that in mind when ranking him, just a little bit unreliable. Chris Olave, speaking of unreliable, the opposite of that, reliable to get you those 10 fantasy points. He has a 32.6% target share on average throughout the entirety of the season so far. Jerry Jeudy had a 25.5% target share in his second game with Dylan Gabriel this last week, so that was promising to see for Jerry Jeudy. Lots of targets there this last week. Jalen Tolbert continued to outsnap Ryan Flournoy, but I am ranking CeeDee Lamb currently this week, so if if he does return. Don't really care about either of them anyways. Travis Hunter ran a route on 86% of dropbacks, which was the highest percentage this season. And if you recall, we've been kind of tracking this increase in offensive usage now for a few weeks, which does also correlate with what happened in week one. Was a defensive back goes down. All of a sudden, Travis Hunter gets utilized much more on defense. Defensive back comes back, and they signed another guy just recently, too, into that secondary. Maybe we are seeing a transition here of Travis Hunter onto the offensive side of the ball, significantly more, enough that he might become usable. So just keep that in mind for Travis Hunter, that things could be turning around for him fantasy-wise for offense. Reports were that Zay Flowers would be limited prior to the game. He was not limited, so definitely don't expect him to be limited next week. And Jakobi Meyers has his fourth straight poor performance. That's crappy. Keeping with the Las Vegas Raiders, Jack Bech saw his season high in usage. He is a rookie, second-round draft pick. I do believe that is more of a direct result of no Brock Bowers. The two of them, Jack Bech, Brock Bowers, both those big bodies that can attack down the seam, down the middle of the field, and cause problems for teams who can't cover that very well. And so it would make enough sense to bring Jack Bech in to compensate for some of the Brock Bowers types of usage. And so I'm not currently attributing that to Jakobi Meyers' recent downfall, but maybe there is an opportunity here. Maybe we start to see the guard change, so we'll just keep an eye on that, see if that's something, especially once Brock Bowers returns, if that were to be something that were to continue, and maybe Jakobi Meyers' usage starts to go down. That's possible. I do think Jack Bech is the future Jakobi Meyers for this team. T. Higgins sees a 20% target share in his first week with Joe Flacco in at quarterback for Cincinnati, and so maybe we are entering a phase where T. Higgins will be, once again, at least usable. So that would be very nice for people who drafted T. Higgins. Matthew Golden saw a season-high 19.2% target share in Green Bay's first game after the bye week. Does it have to do with the fact that they're coming out of the bye? Is it a rookie post-bye bump? Or does it have to do with the fact that Dontavian Wicks got injured in the game? Currently, I'm not ranking Dontavian Wicks, so currently I am expecting Matthew Golden to have more opportunities than he has so far on the season for targets, and for that to potentially continue, but it could be a little bit of both of those. Maybe it's a little bit of post-bye, maybe it's a little bit of Dontavian Wicks having missed a good portion of that game. Kendrick Bourne ran most routes for San Francisco, and he had another good target share of over 20%, so those are good things for Kendrick Bourne. What I will say throws some concern out into the world is obviously there's a plethora of injuries that have been happening with that in that receiver room in general, and just with that team, that if Juwan Jennings is feeling healthier next week again, maybe he's less of a decoy and more of an actual factor. If George Kittle returns this week, which I am kind of expecting to happen, that could obviously eat into Kendrick Bourne's usage. And if Brock Purdy returns, well, we know Brock Purdy has he hasn't had so much time to work with Kendrick Bourne. Mac Jones worked with Kendrick Bourne in New England. Kendrick Bourne was birthed, did come from this San Francisco system, specifically in San Francisco. And so he had a comfort level with it. We know that Mac Jones has a comfort level in this offense, and we know that the two of them had a comfort level with each other. And we know that Kendrick Bourne last week was like the only guy that was healthy, and this week Juwan Jennings ultra banged up. So if Brock Purdy returns, if Kittle returns, I'm going to probably end up moving down Kendrick Bourne from where I currently have him ranked if all of those things happen this week. Isaac TeSlaa, Detroit Lions, he had a season-high route participation rate for Detroit, and that has been climbing really since week one. You'd think he saw 1 week where that dipped down, but other than that, it's been consistently climbing up. And Jameson Williams had a high target rate in the last two of his last 3 games, this week and then 3 weeks ago, not 2 weeks ago. So that is obviously good if Jameson Williams can start to get targeted more. I am currently ranking the Minnesota wide receivers as if Carson Wentz was the quarterback, so we'll keep that in mind. And my loves and fades last week, how did we do? I loved A.J. Brown. All right, well, at least he came through. That was okay. I loved Devonta Smith and Wan'Dale Robinson. So I think Wan'Dale Robinson, a couple of bright spots, but not so many of those this week overall for my loves and fades from what I recall. For my fades, I faded Garrett Wilson. Hey, actually, that was a good one. And then I faded DK Metcalf and Chris Olave. So I loved Chris Olave the week where he had his worst performance on the season, and I faded him the week where he's had his best performance on the season. And I didn't think DK Metcalf was going to have such a great week. He did. He did, and I think he'll have another one. So that is going to bring us on to the rankings. Guys, don't forget, if you like the video, please actually like it. That really, really helps with the algorithm, and so does commenting, and I really appreciate comments. Let me know what I got right, what I got wrong. I definitely, appreciate that, and especially if you're saying I got something wrong, a little bit of evidence of why you think that is definitely is appreciated and sometimes does impact the rankings. You can find the rankings that we're about to go through up on the website, www.theffforge.com. They're live all through the week, and you can find links to them in the description. Those links may not be active yet as of the time of this video coming out, but they should be by afternoon on Wednesday, the day that this video comes out. Once again, running backs video coming out this evening, quarterbacks, tight ends tomorrow morning. I appreciate you. I love you. Let's get on to the Week 7 rankings. And up on the screen, what you're seeing over here, fantasy points, this is on a scale of 0 to 36. Actually, technically, the scale goes a little bit beyond and below that, but nobody's ever going to have at least above that. And if I'm tracking a guy and he's below that, well, then he's probably not worth being tracked anyways. But this is average fantasy points per week with a twist of consistency, and it performs very, very well in terms of predicting which guys are going to help you to win weeks more better. And then we've got our targets, average targets per week tracked over here. These are a little bit cherry-picked. So, for instance, I ended up tossing out Marquise Brown's week 1. That was a very, very weird week where he gets 16 targets. So I removed those numbers from these targets and from that fantasy points scoring system in order to better represent what it'll look like going forward. And when guys get injured early in a game or something, that doesn't represent what we should expect from them going forward in a game that they're going to be healthy in, as long as, of course, they don't get injured in that game again. So I toss out those types of games where a guy gets injured earlier on in the game. Just a heads up on that. Then we've got our Vegas spreads and the implied point total for all these columns. Green is good, red is bad, but we pay attention to these for differing reasons, but implied point total gives a good idea about the touchdown upside, if nothing else. And the spreads give us an idea of like the expected game flow, which is most important really for running backs, I would say, and we don't always have to agree with what Vegas has stated. That is going to bring us on to this first tier of wide receivers this week. We got Amon-Ra St. Brown as my wide receiver 1. These are your essentially must-starts. Of course, that becomes a little less so as we go down, but these are all the guys who I am just going to be starting in almost all situations. Smaller leagues, some situations, maybe it's a little tougher, and you do have some decisions to make within this tier. Justin Jefferson, like I said, if I'm currently ranking Carson Wentz in at quarterback, but if J.J. McCarthy were to return, I will move Justin Jefferson down a little bit, but Philadelphia just lost their stud cornerback in Quinyon Mitchell, and their QB CB2 has already been an issue for them. They don't have the greatest depth in the world, so I like this matchup a lot for Justin Jefferson now without that primary cornerback there, and maybe with Carson Wentz in that quarterback, I think gives a little bit more upside. JSN, Devontae Adams, no Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams obviously a good play then this week, although Jacksonville has not been a great matchup. CeeDee Lamb, I would have a tough, if he's playing, you're going to start him. We could move him down a little bit in the rankings. We'll kind of follow exactly what the injury news looks like, how healthy it seems like he's coming into this game. But going up against Washington, you can't really sit him if he's going to be starting. Drake London, San Francisco, nothing to be too afraid of there. Jamar Chase, welcome back up here for me. I had been ranking him a little bit lower, but, congratulations on getting a decent enough quarterback, maybe. Rome Odunze going up against New Orleans. You love that. Must start. Nico Collins, tougher matchup against Seattle, so that's why he flips behind a couple of these guys. And George Pickens here going up against Washington. Even with CeeDee Lamb, maybe he is a decoy this game. Going up against Washington, it's a good enough matchup. And so I would have a really tough time sitting George Pickens, but looking forward, once CeeDee Lamb is back here, he might have to move down a little bit more in the rankings than where we've been putting him. Once again, good matchup, though. Deebo Samuel going up against Dallas. Tough to sit that. Ladd McConkey, I am currently not ranking Quentin Johnston, so that, obviously we saw that helped Ladd McConkey this last week, and hopefully against Indy, a decent enough matchup that would happen again. DK Metcalf, loving that this week against Cincinnati. Let's go. Cortland Sutton against the New York Giants, loving that this week as well. And Brian Thomas Jr. looking much better as of late. Also, Los Angeles Rams do allow fantasy points to receivers, and that thing's been turning on. So, must start for me there. Rashee Rice just on the edge of being a must start for me. There are some concerns, but coming back against this Las Vegas matchup, you love that. Now, he hasn't played since week 3 of last year. Could be some rust that needs to be knocked off. He's also never played with both Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy. And when he did play with Xavier Worthy last year for those first 3 games where he was absolutely blowing up, Xavier Worthy was just a rookie in his first 3 games. So things have changed. Rashee Rice may definitely not quite be what he was for those first 3 games last year, the end of his rookie season. But nonetheless, up against Las Vegas, it's hard to sit him for sure. So he's just barely making that must-start territory. That's going to bring us on to this next tier here into, strong enough plays, hopefully. Starting off with A.J. Brown against Minnesota. It's actually a really, really bad wide receiver matchup. But for some reason, I'm so misguided. I feel really good about A.J. Brown in this matchup. I don't know. They definitely don't have the type of secondary to be able to handle that. But big concerns for this because, when Jalen Hurts gets pressured, he is not the same quarterback, and it can cause some issues for him. And Minnesota, that's why they're so good against teams, in terms of not letting wide receivers. They get a lot of pressure on teams in a lot of ways and confuse quarterbacks and stuff. So it definitely might not be a good A.J. Brown game. I almost loved him, and then because I'm higher on him, and then I almost faded him because of all of those factors, and I just ended up keeping him ranked here a little bit high. And, I like him. Jalen Waddle, I ended up having to move up a little bit because Cleveland has not been as good against wide receivers in terms of fantasy matchup as they were in the early portion of the season. And, he's getting those a good amount of target share. But as you can see, Vegas is concerned about this game in terms of that touchdown upside and everything. So, I'm not the highest up on Jalen Waddle this week, but we're going to rank him decently. Tyrell McMillan going against Sauce Gardner for the New York Jets. Big time concern there, could get shut down. So he is my first fade of the week because of Sauce Gardner. Xavier Worthy, it's going to be a little bit more crowded there in Kansas City, but that Kansas City offense is a humming, and he's going up against Las Vegas. And Rashee Rice is, once again, his first game back in a long time. So still pretty darn optimistic about Xavier Worthy this week. Chris Olave getting that matchup against Chicago like that. This has got to be the highest implied point total that New Orleans has had all season. So, hey, let's go. Jordan Addison going up against Philadelphia. So I'm liking these Minnesota receivers against Philly's secondary. I don't, especially those cornerbacks. I don't trust that depth. What I will say, slight concern, but also not concerned, is the cornerback who will almost certainly be seeing Jordan Addison the most would be Kelee Ringo. And Kelee Ringo technically does match up pretty well with Jordan Addison in the fact that Kelee Ringo is one of those guys with a good 40 time, but he's not very agile. And Jordan Addison does, a lot of deep route types of things. So he should be able to keep up with Jordan Addison, theoretically speaking. However, I do think Jordan Addison is a significantly better receiver than Kelee Ringo is cornerback in terms of their just who they are as a talent. So I do think Jordan Addison should be able to win that. And if it's Carson Wentz throwing the ball, I think maybe we get there a little bit easier than if it's J.J. McCarthy throwing the ball. Keenan Allen going against Indianapolis. Once again, not afraid of that matchup. I'm willing to play Keenan Allen. I'm willing to play Michael Pittman. It hasn't been pretty as of late. The reason I have Keenan Allen ahead of Michael Pittman, a little bit better of a matchup here on the season. He's been a little bit better, gotten a little, more opportunities as well on the season. And for Indianapolis, part of also no QJ here for Los Angeles Chargers in terms of the ranking. And for Indianapolis, we are seeing that emergence of Josh Downs a little bit. That very well could be part of the reason why Michael Pittman has not been performing so well over the last few weeks. There's a correlation there. Stephon Diggs going up against Tennessee, really good matchup. I like that. Could end up moving him up a couple of spots here, but as you can see on the season, targets the least on average, is production the least compared to this group, but also a solid match there up there against Tennessee. So I'm definitely okay with playing him. And if Terry McLaurin is back this week, I'm going to have a hard time sitting him against Dallas. So he makes it into this tier at the bottom of the tier. What I will say, definitely, almost no matter what we hear about his health, unless it's just really, really good, strong reports about him just being at 100%, a risky play. Let's bring us on to this third tier here for the wide receivers, starting off with Kendrick Bourne, followed by Marquise Brown, DJ Moore, Jameson Williams, Devonta Smith, Romeo Doubs, T. Higgins, Rashid Shaheed, Matthew Golden, Jerry Jeudy, Sterling Shepard, Jacoby Myers, Wan'Dale Robinson. So we're just right in flex territory here, really, with all of these guys. Kendrick Bourne, I am fading this week, and that is with the thought of the return of Kittle, the possible return of Purdy. If Purdy returns, I will probably end up moving him down a little ways. If it's Mac Jones at quarterback, I will probably keep him here, and especially if there's no George Kittle. And then, of course, maybe we'll hear some stuff about the health of Jauan Jennings throughout the week. I don't know how much that would really actually impact the rankings, but that may or may not impact Jauan Jennings' ranking at least. So Kendrick Bourne, a candidate to be a little bit lower in my rankings depending on where the health of that San Francisco offense is. Marquise Brown is a love of the week for me this week because I just know that I'm going to be higher up on him than the experts with Rashee Rice coming back. But you look at, where his average targets have been, leaving out that week one performance, same for fantasy points there. I mean, he kind of deserves to be up here. Obviously, Rashee Rice's return could end up impacting that, but this is a guy that Kansas City went out and they brought in to be their, I don't even want to say pure X or pure number one receiver because it's not quite either one of those, but yes, their outside threat as their primary receiver. And people seem to have just forgotten. I mean, he's a talented receiver. He missed a bunch of time, and because of that, I think people just started to completely fade him. But we see this Kansas City offense clicking. It's up against Las Vegas. I think there is a decent enough chance, especially with Rashee Rice maybe kicking off some of that rust, that Marquise Brown could have another good week here. I'm willing to take a gamble on it because look, I mean, there's 20 receivers maybe that we actually trust right now in the league, especially with all those injuries that have happened this past week. So DJ Moore going up against New Orleans. If he's playing, if he's fine, if the news is good, I like him here. He'd be a candidate to be moving up ahead of Marquise Brown and Kendrick Bourne, depending on how I'm feeling later in the week. Jameson Williams going up against Tampa Bay. I'm willing to take a risk on this. He has been getting targeted more as of late. Hopefully that will continue. We know he's obviously a risky play, but highest implied point total this week for Detroit. I'm willing to take a chance on Jameson Williams more than I'm willing to take a chance on Devonta Smith going up against Minnesota. Once again, wide receivers have not. It's been the worst matchup for wide receivers, at least through the first 5 weeks. Romeo Doubs going up against Arizona, actually not a great matchup, but like Romeo Doubs, if we do get the addition of Christian Watson into this offense, I don't know that I'll so much have that impact him this week, but that would push back these Green Bay wide receivers to some extent, and maybe Matthew Golden more than Romeo Doubs, I think. T. Higgins going up against Pittsburgh here, well, it's just that, hey, at least he's somewhat usable now. Rashid Shaheed in a good matchup. You can see on the season, one of the best actually in this entire tier so far for his production. Matthew Golden, hoping to see that continue. If there is no Dontavian Wicks, I'm willing to take that gamble in one of the higher implied point totals. Jerry Jerry Jeudy against Miami actually hasn't been as good of a wide receiver matchup as I expected to be because teams have been able to run on them quite a bit. But I still don't really respect their secondary. And Jerry Jeudy, if we can get 8 targets against Miami, I think could have some sort of day for you. At least Sterling Shepard looks like he's going to be the wide receiver 1 for Tampa Bay this week. We'll see for sure if that's the case, but currently not ranking Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Emeka Egbuka. So he is a play against Detroit, and, with Baker Mayfield at quarterback, things can definitely happen. Jacoby Myers, it's been yucky. Wan'Dale Robinson against Denver. Don't like the matchup. Now, I know I'm low on him, and I'm fading him, and I don't like doing both of those at once, so I might end up having to raise him up in the rankings. And cornerback Patrick Surtain doesn't necessarily follow guys into the slot, but Wan'Dale has been working from the outside, especially if there's no Darius Slayton again. He could still see a good amount of Patrick Surtain. So I'm just not optimistic about this. This is probably, it looks to me, maybe the lowest implied point total for New York against Denver. I don't like it. Full PPR, obviously that changes a little bit more. We take more of a risk on him not seeing Patrick Surtain so much, being lined up in the slot more, hopefully, for that purpose. As we bring us on to this tier of, playable guys. Troy Franklin, Trey Tucker, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Cooper Kupp, Travis Hunter, Juwan Jennings, Keyshawn Boutte. Maybe they should be ahead of Juwan Jennings. Probably should be. Jordan Whittington, with the injury to Cooper Kupp, he's going to pick up the most of that Cooper Kupp type of stuff. So, 6 targets probably would make some sense here. So you hope that turns into something for you, maybe a touchdown if you get a little bit lucky. That'll bring us on to this next tier, Tyquan Thornton. We're still in usable guy tier, but just I like them a little bit less than the rest. Tyquan Thornton opportunity is probably going to become a little bit more risky, but I do still think that he will be getting onto the field and getting some opportunities. Once again, going against Las Vegas, they could be had deep. Christian Kirk, Jalen Coker. I would like him more. Actually, I love him for this matchup against the New York Jets. The wide receiver 2s tend to kill the Jets, but he is coming back from injury. I got some concerns about the rust and all that good stuff. And it's Jalen Coker. I mean, he had a good year last year. It's not like he's proven anything yet in the league. Alec Iomanor could be the wide receiver 1 here going up against New England. Christian Gonzalez, that wouldn't be a good matchup. I don't have too much faith in it. I'm sure some people will have him ranked higher there with no Calvin Ridley, though. Demario Douglas, Tez Johnson, if you want to take a shot. Torrey Horton, if you want to take a shot. These are your, few targets, deep 70 yards and a touchdown types of guys. And same with, well, really those two mostly in here. Marvin Mims going against the New York Giants, could always be his day. Xavier Legette, I am going to give a love tag to Xavier Legette. So, once again, those wide receiver 2s against the New York Jets. I don't have him ranked ahead of Jalen Coker. I still have Coker ranked ahead of him because I think that's maybe, that should be the case. But Xavier Legette could end up having a week here against the New York Jets, with Tedero McMillan maybe getting shut down. He has had 1 week so far this year. Diami Brown, Luther Burden, especially, obviously, if there is no DJ Moore, Luther Burden will probably move up in these rankings. Isaac Tesla, Tampa Bay, he's been on the field a lot more, hasn't necessarily seen targets because of that, but probably they might come. And then Josh Reynolds with no Garrett Wilson. He's kind of the next man up against Carolina here. You could always go out and play him. At the top of this next tier, we're kind of into, we get down into the guys you definitely don't want to be playing. But at the top here, Malik Washington, Tutu Atwell, Jaden Higgins kind of got buried in the news like last week because they had a bye week anyways. But the team did come out and say that they want to be playing Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel more going forward. So coming out of the bye week, we might see that increased usage for them, especially Jaden Higgins here, second round rookie drafted quarterback. Parker Washington, I believe with the more usage for Travis Hunter, that he's probably not very usable. So actually, I'm going to move Zay Jones up ahead of that at the very least here. So Zay Jones is the guy, assuming MHJ is not in, that I think has the best chance to have some sort of day against Green Bay. You could even rank him a little bit higher, but I think that he's still in that usable territory, probably those 4. Then we really don't want to have to rely on these guys. Parker Washington, Isaiah Bond. I don't think Michael Wilson's a good matchup against the Green Bay cornerbacks. DeMarcus Robinson, Jalen Tolbert, Ryan Flournoy, once again, currently ranking CeeDee Lamb, Hunter Renfrow, Pat Bryant, Kyle Williams. So on bye week are Baltimore and Buffalo, not ranking currently. Calvin Austin, look at this list. Darnell Mooney, Quentin Johnston, Calvin Ridley, Emeka Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Dontavian Wicks, Kevontae Turpin, Adonai Mitchell, Darius Slayton, Ricky Pearsall, Mike Evans. So Ricky Pearsall could be a candidate to return. That would also obviously impact Kendrick Bourne, if that were to be the case. And then already, I don't believe Cedric Tillman can return yet. I know Jayden Reed's not ready to return, and Chris Godwin, it sounds like, definitely out. So that is it for the wide receiver rankings. Thank you so very much. Let's get on out of here. Peace out.